Welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and today we're joined by Eric Daishin McCabe, a Zen monk in Iowa who helps people deal with addiction. Let's find out what a monk in Iowa is doing, helping Iowans overcome what can be a devastating challenge: addiction, treatment, and recovery. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter, for inviting me.
Well, it's a mouthful. I heard about your work, and I heard about the unique brand of work you do with people suffering from trauma. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about your story, and please fill in the monk spaces so it makes
Absolutely.
sense.
Yeah. So I started working, the first time I really started working with people with addictions was when I was in training with my teacher, Diane Benage, in central Pennsylvania. And we were asked it's the largest residential treatment center on the East Coast called White Deer Run. And we were asked to come in and do Zen meditation for the people that were there. And my teacher didn't want to do it, and I thought, wait a minute, I'd like to do it. So I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but I knew that I felt like, if my vow as a Buddhist priest, Buddhist monk, is to help other people in some way, I can't think of a better way of helping people that are suffering from addiction. So I decided to do this work, and that was my first introduction to working with people with addictions. And I learned a lot of lessons short on, but the main thing that I realized was that people really were thirsty for meditation, the ability to calm their mind. And I thought, well, this is something that I can offer. But there was a steep learning curve first, because if you're like me, you're brought up with the idea that drug addiction is something that is, it happens to somebody who lacks discipline, mm-hmm. or is somehow morally defective. And that was, I have to be honest, that was my mindset in going into this work, and it didn't serve me at all. As I started doing it, I started asking some people with more knowledge some questions. And I was introduced to a book by a physician named Gabor Mate called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. And I learned from this book, he documents extensively people with serious addictions. And I learned in that, just by reading the story, that most people with addictions have a background of early childhood trauma in some form or another. And that trauma affects brain development, and it makes somebody very susceptible to addictive behavior that can include drugs or alcohol, but is not limited to that. So addiction, in a very broad sense, can include drugs and alcohol, but it can also be shopping, it could be internet, it could be sex, it could be whatever, you name it. It's the behavior.
So through a very sort of unique circumstances,
yes.
As studying to be a Buddhist monk, or in your studies as a Buddhist monk, experiencing a trauma care facility, dealing with addiction.
Yeah.
It sounds like you became sort of a scholar of the issue through your own interests.
Absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely. And the thing that I got from this is that, from working with addictions, is that, when I first went in, like I mentioned, I saw people as not disciplined enough. And that's a completely wrong perception of the issue. When I started seeing the people that I was working with as having trauma in their history, whatever it may have been, doesn't matter how big or small, then I began to have compassion for the people that I was working with. And I didn't see them as, the problem no longer was that they weren't good enough or they had to learn something. It was that they had not received enough compassion in their lifetime. And so this is where I felt, okay, well, I can teach this. The way that I learned meditation is not going to serve me so well to teach in that particular style to this group of people. I have to have a lot more compassion and understanding in working with them.
And so you actually went to an organization that specializes in trauma-informed care and brought the compassionate sort of meditative side to it.
Absolutely, yeah.
So these are completely two different directions that are sort of met in what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah.
And this organization that taught you trauma-informed care, now this is a big deal in America in this whole climate of medically assisted treatment, other things. A lot of people are looking for alternative and more natural ways to deal with these stresses. Are you seeing that in Iowa as well?
Yes. So I moved from Pennsylvania to Iowa in 2014. My wife is from Ames, and my family, my in-laws are from Ames. So we came out here to be close with them. And immediately when I got here, because actually it's a little bit of a story here. After living with my teacher for 15 years in the monastery, I decided to do a one-year chaplaincy program at a hospital in York, Pennsylvania. And I worked in a behavioral health setting. So that also really informed how I care for people. And while I was doing that, while I was having that experience, I realized that, as a chaplain, I would serve people with mental health issues. And I realized there was a missing component of body awareness. I mean, I could talk about things spiritual or psychological, but trauma happens to a body. It happens to our physical body. And so I felt like, that a treatment plan that incorporates healing the body itself, the physical body, is really necessary. We can't just work on a spiritual or the psychological without also including the physical element.
Now those are great points, and I want to follow up on them. We're going to take a short break.
Great.
I would invite you to continue. When we return, we'll ask Eric to tell us a little bit more about what he's doing and the personal journey, the story of how he became a monk. You don't want to miss this.
Many teenagers don't understand the dangers and effects of marijuana use. Now it's time for Just the Facts, ma'am. An IQ is a score determined from standardized tests to determine intelligence. An IQ of 100 puts the average person in the 50th percentile of intelligence. Regular marijuana use during teenage years can cause a long-term 8-point drop in IQ. A loss of 8 IQ points drops them to the 29th percentile. For more information, go to drugfreeiowa.org.
My dad thinks he can fix anything, but at least once a day, we catch him doing that with our modem. Like things would magically be faster if he could just get it high enough. He doesn't get that it's our phony internet. Looks like I'm gonna have to fix this one. Siri, get me faster internet.
Okay, calling Mediacom now.
Drop the phony internet and get a real deal. Add Mediacom Internet 60 for just $14.99 a month for a year. Call today.
Watching your sister go through withdrawal is the last thing you expect to do. You hope she gets past it, but worry she'll relapse. The story of addiction is all too familiar, but you can change it.
That's 2 out of 3.
If you or someone you know is in recovery from addiction, share your story with the partnership at drugfree.org, because your story can change someone else's.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We know life can embrace many twists and turns, from very humble beginnings in a normal childhood. Many things can happen. This is a story about Eric, and we're going to ask him to tell us about how a Catholic kid from a normal American community became a Zen monk.
Right.
I'm a little curious.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, I had been training with my teacher for about 5-6 years at this point, and I went to visit with my family, my parents, on a vacation. I just had a few days off from the monastery. And I met my mother at the door, and she said, before I really could even put my bags down, she said, and I'll give you, my parents are Brooklyners, so I'll give you my best Brooklynese. My mother says, Eric, I have such interesting conversations with people. I was getting my hair done the other day, and I was talking to this woman, and she's asking me what my children do. I have an older brother and a younger sister. My mother says, so first I talk about your brother. I say, he's a lawyer. He's doing good for himself. He's got 3 kids. And then I skip over you. Then I talk about your sister. I say, she's following in my footsteps with the daycare business. She's got a couple kids of her own. She's got her troubles, but hey, she's doing good. Then my middle son, he's a Buddhist monk. And do you know what this woman says to me? She says, oh, that's wonderful. That means you raised him well. He doesn't care about any of this material stuff. And my mother said, yeah, that's right. But that wasn't, so that's how it kind of, that's where it was 6 years in. But prior to that, it was a real challenge to kind of, for my parents to consider me being a Buddhist monk. And I think for me, big changes took place when I was in college. I majored in biology and I majored in religion. I did a double major. And on the biology end, I was really interested in the environment. What's happening with climate specifically. And on a religion end, it opened up a lot of questions for me, like, what's my life about? What's my purpose? Why am I here? These kind of questions really sunk deep into me. And both of these different fields were coming at the same problem from different ends. One was saying that we have this climate crisis that we're in, and it's caused by human interaction with the way we're interacting with the life systems on the planet. And the other one is saying that, from the religious standpoint, they're saying there's a spiritual crisis going on right now in the world, modern period. And it's because we don't feel a sense of connectedness to the planet, to the world around us, that we can easily justify polluting it or dumping this kind of thing. And so these kind of questions kind of came together for me and made me wonder, like, what can I do with my life that would address these in some way?
So now if you look at a person that says, if this becomes the planet, and am I taking care of it? It's almost perfect symbolism. I mean,
Exactly.
A person that's dealing with addiction and stuff, you're still dealing with an environmental climate.
Absolutely,
with a
yeah.
form of pollution,
Yeah.
and then finding a sort of a holistic spiritual way to help heal.
Absolutely, yeah. A person is no less a face of the planet, is a face of the universe.
Which is the Buddhist aspect of your things.
Exactly.
And it's easy
yeah.
to think that it's always something else,
Right,
but it
no.
always comes back to yourself.
Yeah, what we do to somebody else, we do to ourselves. And I think that's a universal religious teaching right there.
I think that's fantastic. On that point, we'll take a short break and we'll be back to continue the conversation.
All right.
When we do come back from break, we'll talk more about Eric's experiences and how they help him connect with the world of pain and addiction. Stay with us. You don't want to miss this.
You wouldn't walk through the halls of your school naked. Yet without thinking, many teens sext explicit photos of themselves to friends using cell phones, never thinking it'll go further. But once you hit send, you're exposed. You're out there in cyberspace for everyone to see. Sexting, it's dumb, it's dangerous, and it's against the law.
My mom thinks hashtags are something you eat with eggs. She legit has a meltdown every time her phone updates. Last week, she asked me to explain chat snap. So of course, she chose the absolute wrong internet provider, and now we have the slowest internet ever.
Escape Planet Slow and get a real deal. Add Mediacom Internet 60 for just $14.99 a month for a year. Call today.
After Kylie used Coke, she stopped caring about school, friends, or who she had to steal from to get more of it. The story of addiction is all too familiar, but you can change it.
Sleeping in, Dad?
If you or someone you know is in recovery from addiction, share your story with the partnership at drugfree.org, because your story can change someone else's.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. Today we're learning about a relatively new way of dealing with addiction treatment and recovery. Zen Monk Eric Daishin McCabe, that's a mouthful, is here to talk about trauma-sensitive yoga.
All right.
It's a great thing. It's doing wonderful things with people. Tell us about it.
Okay. So this was developed in the Trauma Center, Brookline, Massachusetts, by a yoga teacher named David Emerson, in conjunction with a psychologist, a doctor, Bessel van der Kolk. And it's a particular way of doing yoga. Now, a lot of people, one of the biggest problems I have is explaining what I do, because a lot of people confuse yoga with something that they can't do. You know, that's an immediate perception of yoga. Like, I have to be in great shape, I have to be flexible, I have to be able to stand on my head. And that may or may not be essential for trauma-sensitive yoga. Trauma-sensitive yoga, what it's about, the core is that, first of all, it recognizes that trauma lives in our body. And trauma is about, when we're trapped in a traumatic way of being, we're stuck in the past. So we're living in the present moment as if we are still in the past. And so the healing of trauma, based on that, the healing of trauma comes about when we can actually live according to what's actually happening in the present moment. So in the context of a trauma-sensitive yoga class, what we're doing is bringing awareness into the present moment. What's actually happening right now? And the way to do that, there's many ways to come into the present moment. But as far as trauma-sensitive yoga is concerned, it's about being aware of your own body. And by that I mean the sensations in your body. So for example, we're sitting in chairs. And at a start of a trauma-sensitive yoga class, I may say something like, take a moment to notice the contact your body is making with the chair that you're sitting on. Can you feel the sensation that's being made between your legs and the seat and the chair, or between your feet and the floor? And so people will, take a moment to notice that. That's the key into the present moment. So that's one aspect of trauma-sensitive yoga. The second aspect is the element of choice. And this is also a really important element with regards to trauma specifically, because if you think about anybody who's suffered trauma, they didn't choose to have trauma. It's something that happened to them, and they were forced into it. It's not something that they would have requested.
They don't seek it out on their own.
They're not seeking it out. Yeah. And that affects dramatically one's ability to make choices. It affects our decision-making capacity. And so trauma-sensitive yoga, trauma-centered, trauma-sensitive yoga is about providing people opportunities to make choices within the context of a yoga class. And so, what does that look like?
You don't have to be a monk or anything. You're just simply becoming more aware of your own space.
And this is all, we're being aware of our body, and we're being aware of the integration of our psychology with our physical body. And so in terms of choice, I may ask somebody, or I may suggest, hey, consider bringing your palms together, and if you'd like, reach them out, and then bring them back together if you'd like. Just kind of like this. And you can do this in sync with your breathing. So you have a choice here. You're welcome to try breathing in and reaching your arms out, and then breathing out and bringing your palms back together. That's one way to do this. Another way is to do it without synchronizing your breath with the movement. So you have a choice. Either one of those is fine. And if you're not sure which one to do, you can try both of them out. And based on how you feel inside, the sensations that your body is giving you, you can make a decision on how you'd like to do this.
Well, this sounds like a trick question, though, because I would think that synchronized with your breath, it would always feel better than trying to not be synchronized.
And yes, maybe
Okay.
for some people. For some people, working with the breath can be very, it doesn't work for them. So this is why it's sensitive for trauma. For some people, breath work is not going to be effective. So giving them the option here addresses the need for choice, the need for building the capacity to make decisions, and it also helps somebody who may not work well with breathing practices to forego having to do this with the breath. Maybe they just want to do it without incorporating their breath into it. They can just move, and then they decide how fast or slow to move their hand. They're in charge of this movement. And so being in charge is another aspect of trauma-sensitive yoga. I'm not the teacher telling somebody what to do. You know, in a typical yoga class at a yoga studio, teacher comes in and says, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do it like this. Put your hands here. You know,
no matter how much it hurts,
right, just stick with it.
Yeah.
That's not what trauma-sensitive yoga is about. It's really about empowerment. It's about empowering the person the person who I'm with, the people that I'm with, to take control, to feel a sense of control over their own body-mind.
You know, I know it's popular and I know it's growing all over the country, and it does sound different to me. We'll take a short break and come back, share some advice with our viewers so we can get a better understanding, because it's interesting. It sounds like a very unique way to deal with a very complicated issue.
Yeah.
After a short break, we'll ask Eric to share some insights and advice that may help you better deal with the challenge of surviving life. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this. Right through there.
You have to help her! Help her!
Hey, Sam, can you hear me? Looks like an overdose. Do you know what she was taking?
She doesn't do drugs. Her friends don't do drugs.
No, we're just trying to save your daughter's life. Any idea?
Go to the movies, hon. See you later.
Bye, Sam. Sam, wake up!
Sharing. I mean, I don't mind it when there's enough to go around. Toys with Charlie? Okay. My mint ice cream? Fine. Our slow internet with my whole family at the same time? That's pushing a man too far.
Get unlinked and get a real deal. Add Mediacom Internet 60 for just $14.99 a month for a year. Call today.
I thought texting friends on her cell phone was harmless.
But there she is, our daughter, topless for everyone to see.
I'm so embarrassed for her. I can't even imagine what she must be feeling. How did this happen?
What was she thinking?
Someone sent our teenage son a photo of a naked classmate. If he forwards it, it's a crime.
Our son committing a crime? I had no idea.
And he could be labeled a sex offender.
Tell your teen, sexting is a crime.
My dad thinks he can fix anything. But at least once a day, we catch him doing that with our modem. Like things would magically be faster if he could just get it high enough. He doesn't get that it's our phony internet. Looks like I'm gonna have to fix this one. Siri, get me faster internet.
Okay, calling Mediacom now.
Drop the phony internet and get a real deal. Add Mediacom Internet 60 for just $14.99 a month for a year. Call today.
Thank you for joining us on Surviving Bad. This is our exciting segment where we ask our guest to share some insights and advice with us. Pay close attention. It can make a difference in your life and the life of those you love. Welcome back, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. So with trauma-sensitive yoga, this is an adjunct treatment to whatever anybody is already doing. It's not a replacement for something. I'm not an advocate of getting off of prescription medication or anything like that. If it's something that done with a therapist, then it's not something to be replaced with. However, I sometimes tell people, when I first started doing this work, I told people that if we could tap into our body's own medicine chest, then we would put CVS out of business. We would put the Walgreens out of business, because we have the capacity within us to tap into feeling well.
What do people say, like in terms of testimonials after being in your classes? What kind of responses do you get?
Well, they're varied, first of all. And part of the reason I started getting more deeply involved in this work is because I got such positive feedback from people saying that we should be doing this every day, we need to be doing this more often, I feel so much better. And I thought, well, okay. So I say that, but if we go into trauma-sensitive yoga with this idea that this is going to make me feel better, that this is going to, do it for me, it's actually going to be somewhat counterproductive to the process of healing. We have to go into it with the idea that we're trying this out as a modality of treatment and not to have any high expectations at all. That said, people do oftentimes feel better. So, yeah.
This is the monk in you, where you're sort of being humble. They feel better, but I don't want to take all the credit for it.
Absolutely not. Yeah, it's not me.
What kind of venues do you practice in?
So mainly I teach at the hospital in Des Moines, at Broadlawns. Okay. I also teach at Central Iowa Psychological Services, which is in Ames. And then privately, I am available.
I've heard you work with some prison populations.
Yes, thank you. Also at Fort Dodge Prison. Mm-hmm.
How's that working out?
I love it. Yeah. These are all populations that, especially inmates in prisons that have trauma background. No matter how much we may feel that somebody behind bars is not worthy of compassion, I think even more so, if we know even a hair about their past, we'll have a lot more compassion for people in prison.
And that is a great message. How do people get a hold of you and find out more about this?
So you can contact me through my email address, daishin@zenfields.org. Just send me a message. Prerequisites are that you are in therapy, that you have a therapist that you're working with at present. Doesn't have to be regularly, but to some degree, and that you have not had psychiatric hospitalization within the last 6 months. So those are the two prerequisites. Other than that, it's pretty much open to anybody.
And thank you for joining us today, and keep your eye on Mediacom MC22 for our next episode, where we explore Iowa stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. On Surviving Bad on Mediacom MC22, your local programming leader.